Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Packers Unscripted from Packers.com. I am Mike Spofford, joined by my partner in everything Packers, Wes Hodkiewicz, coming to you here from our studios at Lambeau Field. Wes, the Packers are coming off of a 16-3 loss at Minnesota to end the regular season, but this game was not about the scoreboard. It wasn't about the final result. Packers weren't playing to win. They were playing for health in the playoffs. That was the priority. The vast majority of the starters rested, did not play. But they were also looking to see who amongst the reserves were going to get a lot of snaps in this game, more than they would get in a normal game, who might be able to help the Packers in the playoffs. And I think there's one name you and I both have kind of on the tip of our tongue who made a little bit of a case for himself that he may see some playoff action.
I was super impressed by Trayvon Diggs in this game. I could not believe this guy on 4 days' notice comes in to Lambeau Field, the facilities, and has to learn this playbook and goes out on the football field at US Bank Stadium and holds his own. Was talking to him after the game. He mentioned the plan was to play first quarter, maybe into the second quarter, and he said by the time that came around, he wanted to play the whole game. He just enjoyed being out there. He enjoyed having fun playing football again. Like Matt LaFleur said afterwards, we'll have to see exactly how the secondary shuffles out, who's going to be playing where, but I thought Diggs made a really strong case for himself that he can help the Green Bay Packers this season.
Yeah, and by the way, just a few days after arriving, we're going to line you up across from Justin Jefferson, right? Not that he was lined up across from him on every snap, but that was part of Diggs' assignment in terms of getting acclimated to Green Bay's defense. I'll be very interested to see how this plays out with Green Bay's secondary. We talked last week about how the injuries have hit the cornerback position hard. You lose Nate Hobbs and Kamal Hadden essentially for the rest of the season in that game against Baltimore. And Trayvon Diggs suddenly falls into your lap. It gives you another option with Keyshawn Nixon, with Carrington Valentine. So we'll see how the Packers ultimately do that. I thought another guy who, now it's not as though he hasn't played, but I thought another guy who acquitted himself quite well and could see himself in certain situations on the field in the playoffs would be the rookie edge rusher Barron Sorrell, 4th-round draft pick out of Texas. He looked, I think, more explosive off the ball in terms of having, a large volume of snaps in this game. He looked more explosive off the ball than maybe we've seen throughout the course of the season, and I think that's a guy who might get a chance to show something in the postseason.
I hope he does, because Barron Sorrell had as many tackles in this game as he had this season. 8 tackles. He gets the sack of, I believe at that point it was Max Brosmer. And the fact is, Michael, actually no, it was still Jefferson. I can't remember. Or McCarthy.
I can't remember who. It was a 0-yard sack. It was a little bit off of a scramble and got him down before he crossed the line of scrimmage.
He got his first full sack, though. He had a half sack earlier this season. He mentioned that was a goal of his. And then he also showed the extra effort play when Brenton Cox Jr. got the strip sack of Brosmer late in the game. They're in the red zone, and here comes Barron Sorrell picking that thing up, talking to him afterwards. He mentioned he saw the end zone, but what he didn't see was Brenton Cox laying on the mat right there before him, and he trips over him. But these are the moments, as you and I talked about, that you wanted to see in this game. You wanted to see young guys step up. I felt Barron Sorrell did that. I thought Brenton Cox obviously did that, 3 quarterback hits in this one. But then also Colin Oliver, who was a guy that didn't play all season long. He had the hamstring injury. This was the first time he'd ever been in an NFL game.
Yeah.
And when people made this baby Micah comparison, and obviously he doesn't want any part of that. He understands we're talking about a guy that's probably an all-pro this season, multiple-time Pro Bowler. But when you see the extra effort and the way that kid strained, the way that he chased down the quarterback, the speed to power that he possesses for a guy that is his size, I was super impressed by it. So, yeah, offensively, there was a lot going on there for Green Bay. It wasn't the most productive, fruitful day you've ever seen. But defensively, for Green Bay resting virtually everybody except for Evan Williams and Javon Bullard, for what that defense put out there, I was super impressed.
Yeah, I thought the Packers defense really held its own against whether it was McCarthy or Brosmer. McCarthy took himself out of the game early in the third quarter. It sounded like that hairline fracture in his hand was starting to bother him, and so he took himself out. They went to Brosmer the rest of the way. But if you had told me that essentially a whole lineup of reserves on defense was going to hold the Vikings to one touchdown, you take that. That's a pretty darn good effort defensively. Offensively, the Packers were a bit overmatched. I think that might even be an understatement. I mean, Brian Flores he was still throwing the blitzes at Clayton Tune on third down, and the Vikings were playing the defense that they've played down the stretch here, and with a lot of substitutes on the offensive line, not your best receivers out there. Clayton Tune, your number 3 quarterback, was trying to handle all of that while also, you have to go silent count because you're on the road in a dome and all that kind of stuff. It was a rough day for Green Bay's offense. No two ways about that. But health for the playoffs was the priority, and the Packers came out of this game. There were only 2 injuries being discussed. One, Bo Melton appeared to injure himself. They announced it as a knee injury on punt coverage. Yeah. We haven't really gotten an update on exactly where Melton is.
Heck of a tackle, though.
Yeah, it was a heck of a tackle, for sure. The other one was late in the game. Javon Bullard exited the game with a knee injury, but then he told reporters in the locker room that he was fine. He just got it hyperextended a little bit, so so that's why he didn't go like running off the field, because he needed to just get it checked out first. But he felt he was fine after the game. Not something that that necessarily is gonna factor in.
That was a big one though, because they don't have a backup there anymore.
Yeah.
Because Nate Hobbs is out. He's the backup nickel. So I think everybody was kind of having their Adam's apple in their throat a little bit there about okay, well, what exactly is going to happen with this? But yeah, he did say afterwards he was feeling fine. We've seen it. The guy played through a fractured heel last year during the playoffs in Philadelphia. You wanted to be as healthy as possible to give his best performance, but. Yeah, I mean, if that's what it ended up coming out of this game, I felt like Packers can consider that a pretty solid day.
Yeah, I mean, I think Matt LaFleur talked after the game. I mean, it's all time will tell, and we'll see if this was the right approach for Green Bay. But he prioritized health. With what happened in Week 18 last year when you lose Christian Watson, not only obviously for the playoffs, but for half the season this year to a major injury. Jordan Love had also banged his elbow in that Week 18 game last year, and he obviously was able to play against the Eagles in the playoffs. But those are just the risks that Matt LaFleur didn't want to take, and I think ultimately the Packers are going into Chicago. It'll be Saturday night in the wild card round at Soldier Field. I think the Packers are going into Chicago health-wise. You can't argue that health-wise they're in a better spot than they were in last year at this time.
It's been 3 months, Mike, since they've had their bye. The Packers had to create an opportunity for themselves to take a breath, to get a breather, to allow these guys to let their bodies heal. And when you see Josh Jacobs and Jordan Love and, obviously, their linebackers and Quay Walker and Edgerrin Cooper all getting a chance to be just a healthy scratch, Xavier McKinney being a healthy scratch, and then not having to really go too far into the depth chart. Jaden Reed replaced Bo Melton after he got injured, but wasn't really getting banged up, wasn't really taking those hits. That's a major win, I feel like, for the Green Bay Packers. And I know we'll talk here in a second about the Chicago Bears and how that final game played out for them, but the Bears played everybody. They went for the win. They went to clinch the number 2 seed on their own, regardless of what happened with Philadelphia. But what that means is the Bears put all their starters, not necessarily at risk, but they took those bumps and bruises and everything like that. The Packers had a chance to recalibrate. And now here we are in a short week. It's a Saturday night matchup. Packers won't practice on Tuesday, right? They're only going to have 2 days of practice. They'll be traveling on Friday, but they're now coming off this pseudo bye that they created for themselves.
Right.
In a season in which the NFL keeps making this longer and longer and longer, the Packers had to find a way to kind of create that barrier. I felt like they did that. And as much as people talk about momentum and winning football games, that's awesome. You want to win as many football games as possible. The fact is, on Christmas Day, the Lions, falling to the Minnesota Vikings, that clinched a playoff spot for Green Bay with 2 games left to go.
Right.
The Packers have not been able to get out of these games without injury here, it seems like, over the last month. 23 transactions last week needed to get through this game here against Minnesota. So for the Packers to be in this spot right now, given all the various circumstances and permutations of how this could have worked out, I think like Matt LaFleur gave his team the best opportunity possible to try to get on a run now.
Absolutely, I agree with you. And you mentioned, the NFL keeps making the season longer, et cetera, and the Packers had their bye. The NFL doesn't necessarily give convenient bye weeks, right?
No.
The Packers had their bye way back in week 5. It was after only 4 games. And so then they were playing 13 consecutive games without a week off. If the Packers had their bye in, week 11 or week 12, the approach to week 18 might have been very different. So all of that factored into how Green Bay went about it. And just so the fans understand, the starters, the vast majority of the starters did not see any action in Minnesota. But it's not as though they've just been sitting around doing nothing. You have to understand, Matt LaFleur scheduled the practice week last week. There was a division of duty, so to speak. There was a portion of practice that was devoted to the starters on offense going 11 on 11 against the starters on defense, what they call the ones versus ones. Mm-hmm. And so it was not scout teamwork. It was simulating real game action. Matt LaFleur's calling plays, Jeff Hafley's calling defensive scheme, and they were going at it for multiple practice periods last week. Then the other part was taking Clayton Tune in the offense and the guys who were going to play on defense and having them do some scout teamwork and to try to get ready to play on Sunday. So it was using the practice time that they had last week with the starters. And from talking to the guys in the locker room, it sounded like those were some pretty intense practice periods. Like the coaches, I think, asked those guys, hey, all right, we've told you you're not going to be playing on Sunday. So let's use this to tune up, to get ready. But when it's practice, you're not out there with the injury risk because you're not tackling to the ground. The quarterback's not getting hit, all of these kinds of things. So you're reducing the injury risk greatly, obviously, in practice. So that was the plan last week. And now this week they find out the game is on Saturday night in Chicago at Soldier Field. So you set up the schedule. It sounds like Tuesday is a walkthrough, mostly like a mental day and everything. And then they're going to have the 2 days of practice on Wednesday and Thursday to get ready before jumping on the plane on Friday. So this has all been very carefully planned out since the loss to Baltimore and the injuries that came along with that and whatnot. We'll find out soon enough here exactly where things are with the Packers' health. We'll probably find out actually more on Wednesday when they actually have the first practice, in terms of who's out there or who's limited and whatnot. But yeah, this was all about getting the team in the best possible position health-wise to reset and to regroup and, to put your best foot forward in the playoffs, because the Packers weren't able to do that last year. Right. And Matt LaFleur's goal was to be able to do that this year and then see if it makes a difference.
And look at what happened just a year ago with Kansas City, right? They played Miami, that first game, that streamed game on Saturday Night Football, and a lot of it was resting guys. And then suddenly you get to the playoffs, and next thing you know, they're back in the Super Bowl once again. There's 14 teams now. There's 12 that are going to play this upcoming weekend. Everybody has a shot at this thing.
Yep.
Packers have lost a lot this season, but what have they gained along the way? That's what the question is ultimately going to be now that these games are win in advance, lose, go home. So I just feel like this team has gained so much experience when you go back to 2 years ago, going into Dallas, becoming the first 7 seed since the expansion to win in the wild card weekend round, pushing teams the way that they've pushed them, San Francisco, even last year, for everything that happened in that opening series against Philadelphia, the way that they hung in there against what ended up being the eventual Super Bowl champion. This team is young. They were, once again, for the 3rd straight year, the youngest team in the National Football League, but they are experienced. They have an entire 2022 and 2023 draft class that have been through these trials and tribulations now. And what I'm most excited about is, a lot has been made about, 2.5 weeks now that Jordan Love hasn't played. Jordan Love is not a rookie quarterback anymore.
Right.
He's an experienced 27-year-old quarterback. He knows what this offense is. He's been steeped in it. This is the only thing he's been schooled in. He's had the same play caller now for 6 years. So it's not about, okay, do you play him late in the season? Do you not? What does the concussion do in terms of his availability and is he missing time? If Jordan Love is healthy, the Green Bay Packers have a shot. And ultimately, I think they dedicated themselves to those principles, and they'll get put to the test now. The third time, Michael. It's crazy. Third time. This storied rivalry, the most heralded rivalry in NFL history. It's only the third time the Packers and Bears are meeting in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen at Soldier Field. And for Packer fans and for everybody in that locker room, this is a massive opportunity.
Yeah.
I'm excited to watch it.
I want to talk more about that as well with regard to the rivalry and everything that's gone into it this season, but we do need to pay some bills first, so let's hear a quick word from our sponsors. SiriusXM NFL Radio delivers hard-hitting analysis and up-to-the-minute NFL news that true football fanatics need 24/7, 365. At Cousin Subs, we have something for everyone, like our Wisconsin cheese curds, mac and cheese, golden fries, and creamy shakes, all paired with your favorite sub or sub in a bowl. Cousin Subs, 50-plus years of better. Pit Boss Grills, the official grill of Packers tailgating at Lambeau or at your house. Take your game day to the next level with a Pit Boss wood pellet grill. Pit Boss Grills available at Menards. Hey Packers fans, we always knew Lambeau Field was a wonder, but now it's official. Learn more about all the wonders of Wisconsin at travelwisconsin.com/wonders. Welcome back to Packers Unscripted. All right, Wes, you mentioned it's the third time the Packers and Bears will have met in the postseason. 1941 was the first at Wrigley Field, the Western Conference playoff, The Bears won that. 2010 NFC Championship game at Soldier Field. The Packers won that on their way to the Super Bowl title, obviously. What I like about the way this fell, because we talked last week that neither one of us was going to spend any energy rooting for whether the Packers would get the Eagles or the Bears as far as the first-round opponent. But what I like about the way this fell is now the Packers are going to walk back out onto Soldier Field 3 weeks after they let a big game get away from them.
Yeah.
A game that they know they controlled, that they were in command of the game, and it simply got away down the stretch. Just 3 weeks later, they get to go back and try to avenge what happened. And this Packers team, in my opinion, is going to walk out of that tunnel at Soldier Field firmly believing that they're the better team and that they're going to win the game. That's going to be the mindset. There's no other mindset to take based on how they played against the Bears in the regular season.
Yeah, and I remember being in that locker room a couple weeks ago and the guys sort of reiterating that they played them and beat them for 58 minutes and they let it get away.
Yeah.
And they did that without Micah Parsons. So it doesn't even have to be this like magical thing like, well, okay, well, you don't have Parsons, you can't win. No, the Packers were that close to doing it.
And they did it without Jordan Love for a majority of the game as well.
Absolutely. So I love the fact that it's a 40-minute flight down there. The Packers do this road trip every single year. The process, the preparation, this is nothing foreign to them. They're going to be able to still be on their regular clock, so to speak, with it being an NFC North opponent. What I also love about it is the Packers have had an unparalleled amount of success at Soldier Field. I think I saw the statistic from our good friend Rob Domofsky. I believe he maybe sourced it to ESPN, but I think outside of the Patriots and Jets, no team has won more since 2010 in their opposing venue than the Packers have at Soldier Field.
Right.
This is a place that has a lot of positive vibes for Green Bay. So when people were asking us last week, do you want Philly, do you want Chicago? I always wanted Chicago. And I know there's a lot of Packer fans out there that are like, well, it makes me nervous because what if they lose? But what if you win, right? I mean, that's the way I look at it. It's like the old Max Verstappen line about he doesn't think about losing. He thinks about how do we win, right? So I love that idea that you are the number 7 seed. What better way to announce your presence, right? To knock off the NFC North champion, your vaunted rival, than going into their stadium and taking them out in the wild card weekend. I feel like the Packers have everything to play for right now. I feel like this is the opportunity that they've wanted. Has this season gone perfectly according to plan? Obviously not. The litany of injuries, the 15 people on injury reserve, it all speaks to the challenges and the adversity that Green Bay has faced this season. But they're still here. And for that game, when you go back to Soldier Field, the Bears pulled off the comeback. They won the North. They did everything that people wanted to see them do if you're a fan in the Chicagoland area. But realistically, all the Packers lost was the opportunity to host this game. One way or another, it was going to work out that it was going to be these two teams playing each other. The path is not easy, but it's not impossible. So for Green Bay, I'm amped up. I think that honestly, this is probably the most excited I've been for Wild Card Weekend during my entire time with Packers.com. I just think that this is going to be something special.
It did feel like when we left Soldier Field a few weeks ago, the game ends, the chaos at the end with the late onside kick, the touchdown, the overtime, the bomb for the winning TD. Soldier Field's going crazy. The Bears are going crazy. You and I do our usual divide and conquer after the game. You go to the locker room to talk to the players. I go to the press conferences with the head coach and the quarterback. It felt like when we were getting on the bus afterward to make our way with the team back to the airport, fly back to Green Bay late on that Saturday night, it felt like that wasn't the last time we were going to be at Soldier Field for as far as the 2025/26 season is concerned. I'm not surprised at all that it turned out that way, and it feels like it's fitting. I mean, the way the Packers beat the Bears on the final play at Lambeau with the interception of Keyshawn Nixon, and then the Bears beating the Packers on the last play in overtime, getting the walk-off touchdown. It's just fitting that these teams are going to meet for a third time and decide, okay, who's the best team out of these two storied rivals in the 2025 season? Go out there and prove it.
And I just love the idea, too, that I was talking about this and wrote about this. The NFC North was so odd this year. I found that statistic yesterday about how the Bears were the first team since the NFL Central, NFC Central, was founded in 1970 after the merger. The Bears were the first team that had a losing record within the division, but yet still won the title, right? There had only been one other team that had a non-winning season and done that, and it was Detroit in 1993. What happened then? The Packers ended up knocking them off in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Right? So I just feel like this is the true barometer now of not necessarily who is the NFC North champion. The Chicago Bears are the NFC North champions. You give them that respect. But who deserves to let their season move on, press on, move forward? Neither of these teams are perfect. They both have their blemishes. You heard it after the game. Ben Johnson was talking about he wasn't happy with the way that his offense played against Detroit.
Right. They didn't score until the fourth quarter.
Yeah, so
they were shut out for 3 quarters by the Lions.
Yeah, so it's like, and now they're going to have their own adversity. C.J. Gardner-Johnson, I believe, currently in the concussion protocol. They might be able to get back Kyler Gordon, but they have a lot of their own things to deal with in their backyard.
Yeah.
So who's going to be the one that overcomes all this? Who's going to be the one that answers the questions that have kind of lingered throughout the season? Whoever does is the team that advances. Whoever does gets that Final Four of the NFC. But for the Packers standpoint, again, I just think that the way that they've been conditioned and trained, and when you think back to this thing starting back in April with the offseason program, everybody knew what was at stake this season. Everybody knew what the potential of this team was. And especially once Micah Parsons entered the building, everything got revved up another notch. Parsons isn't here for the rest of the year. Who's going to be the guy that steps up? Maybe it will be a Barron Sorrell. Maybe it'll be a Kingsley Enagbari. Maybe it's a Trayvon Diggs in the secondary that makes that big play that the Packers have been looking for.
Yeah.
This is legend-making season now. This is where guys go from just being a really good football player, a guy that people talk about, to being remembered forever, right? The way that Nick Collins did, the way that James Starks did, Tramon Williams, the list goes on and on and on. So, it's going to be a lot of fun. And for the Bears, I think the pressure's on them. I really do. I think this is a team that caught some people off guard this year. But at the same time, they've had extremely high expectations for years now since they drafted Caleb Williams. What does it all mean?
Yeah. It's interesting you bring up the NFC North and some of those funky statistics, because I read a couple of others that this is only the second time since the advent of divisional play, since I believe it was the Super Bowl era. So you're talking the last 60 years.
Yeah.
Only the second time that all the teams in a single division finished above 500. And along with that, it's also only the second time in the Super Bowl era that the last place team in a given division finished with a better record than the first place team in another division, because the Carolina Panthers are in the playoffs as the NFC South champion at 8-9, and the Lions and the Vikings both finished 9-8 at the bottom of the at the NFC North, finished with a better record than that division champion. So it's been one of those strange years. But as we say every year, when it comes to the postseason, it truly is a reset. It's a starting over. The only thing that's been determined by the records at this point, as you referenced earlier, is where the game is played.
Yep.
That's really all that it is at this point. And the Seattle Seahawks earned a first-round bye. The Denver Broncos did the same thing in the AFC, so they get a little bit of an advantage. They don't have to win a wild card game to get to the next round. They're already there. But for everybody else, for the other 12 teams playing on wild card weekend, it is absolutely a reset, a start over, and what have you got?
And I was listening to Dave Canales' press conference too, him talking, the head coach of the Panthers, talking about what's going on with them right now. They're an 8-win team that's in the postseason, and it doesn't matter now. There's 14 teams with a shot at this thing. Everybody is 0-0. It's the question of whether or not you can get to 1-0 after this weekend. So, and for Packer fans, and you can't just sit there and always grab onto history and use that as just this is just foretelling of everything that's going to happen. But between what happened in 2010 and what happened in 2023, if you combine those two ideas, anything is possible, right? You're going to tell the 2010 team that squeaked into the playoffs, got past Philadelphia, they were going to go into Atlanta and just completely rout the Falcons the way they did after the season that Atlanta was in the middle of?
Right.
You look at how people were so high and mighty about Dallas and Dak Prescott and the weapons they had, and then the Packers shut them down for 3 quarters for the most part. And Jordan Love played some of his best ball he's ever played in that game. So, it's going to be a fun weekend, and I can totally see why the NFL slotted the Packers and Bears for this Saturday night time slot. I think it's going to be widely viewed, and there's going to be a lot of hype surrounding it because, again, when you add in the factor, the pro wrestling hype factor, the gimmick factor, the rivalry, the narratives, the game sells itself.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, we will talk more Packers-Bears. We will talk more about the other matchups in the NFC, in the AFC, everything with Wild Card Weekend on our next show. But for now, we're going to call it a wrap on this edition of Packers Unscripted. Be sure to follow all of our coverage of the team here during Wild Card Week on Packers.com. For Wes, I'm Mike. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We will see you next time.